So would you read the item, Madam Clerk? Yeah.
Certainly. Item 18, Stage 3 Drought Update.
Mr. Hagmark, nice to see you.
Thank you. Me too. Madam Mayor, council members, Joshua Hagmark, Water Resources Manager, here today to give our monthly drought update. Today we'll be covering the drought status, demand status for the community, water supply strategy, water supply status, and water conservation. So as you might predict, it's been a very dismal rainfall year. Gibraltar with just almost 4.5 inches of rain, or 23% of normal. Kachuma 4.16 inches, or 30% of normal. And then downtown Santa Barbara with 2.42 inches, or 18% of normal. I did quickly look up for Santa Barbara. The lowest rainfall year I could find was 6.4 inches. So basically we need to get about 4 inches of rain to break even with the worst year, which is completely possible in March. And the high pressure ridge that has been pushing storms around us has finally broken down. So I'm optimistic we'll see something. I don't know if it's going to be a game changer for March, but optimistic we'll see something more than we've seen in the last 2 months. As for the drought monitor, they have moved up the significance for our area. It is now severe for our region of California. We had been in a moderate stage, which we had been talking about the localities of Santa Barbara County and the fact that we really didn't benefit as much from last year's rainfall, but it still remains an emergency situation for us and a very significant situation. As far as rainfall predictions, it's still predicting below average rainfall for the remainder of our rainfall period. Conservation for January was at 25%, which is still pretty remarkable. January was incredibly dry except for that January 9th storm, and warm, as you may recall. So we are seeing more water usage than we typically see in January. Our overall conservation, though, for the last 12 months is at 39%. As you might expect, with more water usage in January than we anticipated, revenues came in strong. We were seeing more Tier 2 and Tier 3 water sales than we had predicted in the model. As far as our water supply strategy, we do go through this on a regular basis, but we can just stop and look. Typically, this graph goes out 6 years, and we've continued to add to this because this drought won't go away. But the whole point of this is to show how we transition through our different supplies and how we are looking out into the future to address our needs. We are currently in year 7 of this drought cycle, in 2018, with planned use of desal, water purchases, state water, Gibraltar water, a little bit of Kachuma carryover, which is really a transfer of water from Montecito, and then a Kachuma allocation, which we're planning to use this year. When we look out ahead, we do have a water shortage in 2020. Our plan is to come back in May when this water year or rainfall year is over and talk about how we anticipate addressing that. On the table will be obviously a discussion about desal and the cost of additional expansion of that, along with additional conservation measures that we could potentially look at. So we want to look at a suite of different options in May. As for Gibraltar, it's currently at 40% of capacity at just over 2,000 acre feet of water. We did get about 500 acre feet of inflows from that January 9th storm, but I'm afraid not much of that is water. And they've had a few water quality tests come back, and the water quality is really poor. Like, we thought the water quality was poor after the Zaka fire. This seems to be setting a new benchmark and doesn't appear to be settling out or cleaning up. So we have stopped diversions from the lake at this point, hoping that things will improve. But at this point, it really need some continuous flows coming into the reservoir to actually spill and past some of the organics that are in this lake downstream. This is a little graphic of the Kachuma storage. Did we skip a slide here? No. Nope. This is the graphic. We've showed this before, showing the various stages, with the city declared stage 1 in February 2014, stage 2 May of 2014, and then stage 3 ultimately in May 2015. We did see last year a little bump in inflows into Kachuma, which is great. And then again, starting to come down again. It's not likely we're going to see a significant jump this year, but I think it's kind of shows you that we are right back in this area where we were in 2014 when the emergency was really taking hold here. As far as Kachuma storage, it's at 39% of capacity, just over 75,000 acre feet. We received about 600 acre feet of inflow, and because of the larger mass there, we didn't note a significant drop in the water quality there. The current allocation for this year was 40%, and unless we get some substantial inflows, we don't anticipate any additional allocations going out. The city's available supply from Kachuma is about 7,160 acre feet of that 75,000. And unfortunately, we're to that point again of talking about putting the barge back out. And there's a timeline, and I have some more information to share on that. Just go here. So this is a graphic. This is a kind of a planning level graphic that we're putting together, but basically wanted to point out, as I just mentioned, we're at 75,000 acre feet in the reservoir. We need to install the piles for the pipeline before it gets to 64,500. So we have roughly 10,000 acre feet of buffer in there right now. We anticipate we'll be at 64,000 right around the August timeframe. So that's when we need to make that decision. And then following that at 39,000 is when we need to actually have the barge installed. We don't expect that until next summer. And then the other site we'd move to, which is at when the reservoir reaches 22,000 acre feet. Did have some pictures just to remind the council of what everything looks like. This is looking southeast. There's the intake tower. There is site 1, which is the closer location, and then site 2, which is in a deeper part of the lake. Requires quite a bit more piping to get to there. This is turning around and facing more of a northwestern look. And again, there is site 1, where the barge was just a few years ago, and then site 2, where it was in 2016. And then here's where our state water comes through, and that's why it's important that we continue to be able to move not only the city's Kachuma water, but any state water that we're bringing through. And then here's some great pictures. I wish these were renderings, but these are actual pictures from the last round. And you can see why it's important that we get in there in the August timeframe and set the piles. It's basically we'll have just enough water in the lake to be able to float in there. Once the water depth basically turns into mud, you really can't get a vehicle out there to place the piles. So they'll place the piles. And you can kind of see how the pipeline runs through there, and then ultimately how it can dry out, and that's our only lifeline to moving water out of the lake. Imported water, we continue to maximize our available capacity in the state water project to deliver water, which is around 280 acre feet a month. The city's imported water available is about 1,600 acre feet in Kachuma and 1,000 acre feet in San Luis Reservoir. We were, as you may recall, wanting to make sure we got enough water out of San Luis in case it spilled. That's no longer a threat. DWR allocation right now is at 20%. We are anticipating it might actually go down because the rainfall in Northern California has been so dismal. DWR is actually contemplating backing away from the allocation that they've given so far. So we're keeping an eye on that. To give you a kind of perspective, there is an index of weather stations in Northern California and the Sierras. The index, kind of again a pooling of a bunch of these weather stations, typically gets about 50 inches a year. That's the average rainfall. They have gotten 20. So they're about 30 inches below the average rainfall. And so that is what's driving a lot of this. The other factor is Orville. As you remember the spillway issues last year, they are still doing construction. And because of that, they have brought down the lake. It's now at 40% of capacity, so that they didn't want to spill in any way this year. And so they've kind of taken away a buffer going into, unfortunately, if we're going into a reoccurrence of this drought. So the city currently is pursuing 1,500 acre feet of water purchases this year. We have contacted CCWA, and they are looking on our behalf. We are looking both several different options, but one, again, approaching rice farmers in Northern California if the water is available, potentially purchasing that water. And, of course, there's the conveyance losses of moving that water through the Delta. And we're also looking at transfers, but unfortunately that comes with the return component. And then, of course, approaching other CCWA members to see if anybody else is interested in selling any water. Right now, the city has about 3,300 acre feet of water debt. Groundwater, our groundwater basins are currently all resting. There's really no new information here. We do turn them on frequently to make sure everything's still operating, but for all intents and purposes, they are resting. The desal plant continues to plug away and in full operation. We have been working with IDE to try and set up a public tours, basically kicking that off with an open house. Right now we're tentatively talking about April, but it's really on IDE to make sure that we can do it in a safe manner. And so we're working closely with them. Again, this is kind of some of the challenges that we struggle with because we needed this facility up and running to meet our needs in the drought. And of course, we didn't have the time to go through and work out these, public tours elements. And so we're working out of that backwards, trying to make sure we can do it in a safe manner. But we do recognize that this is an important facility to the city, and there's a lot of interest in getting in and seeing how it works. As I reported last time, fresh off the press, we did not make the initial funding list for the desal grant. However, we did submit a rather lengthy response to DWR on that matter. It really came down to them disqualifying our project because we didn't commit to operating it all the time, which wasn't a requirement of the grant application, and really kind of an odd one. So with the help of Senator Jackson, we have been pushing back pretty hard, and they're going to take another look at our proposal again and see, hopefully they'll come to the right conclusion. As for water conservation, before we jump into this...
Mr. Hagmark, Mr. Rouse has a question.
Well,
Absolutely.
When you were done with your part, I was going to ask a question about some...
Yeah, I have one more thing to add just before we jump into water conservation. We have been contacted by a few customers related to high water usage during the Thomas Fire. It runs the gamut as to, some people turned their sprinklers on and left. Not what we're wanting to see. There were some cases where the fire department actually was staged at their house using their water to protect the community surgically. In those cases, it's just like pulling water from fire hydrant. We are working with those homeowners if the fire department agrees that they were using their water. But just wanted to make sure that council knew, the water rate funds that we collect under Prop 218, we cannot just be granting anybody a relief from their water bill if they made some poor decisions. Some were also affected by power outages, and their sprinkler timers went off and watered more frequently than they normally would have. So just making you aware of that situation and how staff is responding to those. So that ends my comments, and I was happy to answer yours.
Yes, thank you. So, Mr. Hagberg, going back to the water supply strategy budget, and we've got that at what our normal budget would be in normal water usage years, but then our actual usage, that line is somewhere far below, of course, where we've got our graphs, right? What is it? What is our annual average usage in terms of acre feet in the last few years? About?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, we are now right below 10,000 acre feet.
And then what is the projected release for the for NIMS for the fish?
It varies. It's, if I remember right, it was somewhere around 300 acre feet a month.
A month, okay.
So is that 3,600 acre feet a year?
Okay.
And 30 acre feet during a drought.
Yeah, that's been some of the. It's supposed to be much less, but that has been kind of the dialogue back and forth between NIMS. It's supposed to be 30 acre feet a month, but we've struggled to get NIMS to come around to that change.
And actually, that's where I was going with my question. Is there, in fact, a conversation? I mean, are we engaged with our federal officials and whatnot? Because there's obviously environmental consequences to producing water from desal, so as well as trying to preserve whatever the biologics are, which I'm not really clear on what the biologics are up there anymore, if there are, in fact,
Yes.
animals.
Yes, there are impacts, and that's exactly it. We've been helping the Bureau prepare for a discussion with NIMS on several topics, but really ranging about releases for fish.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Go ahead, please.
Yep.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, my name is Madeline Wood. I'm the Water Conservation Supervisor, and today I'm here to announce the recipient of the 2017 Water Hero Award. So this award is given out every year, and it highlights individuals, businesses, and organizations that go above and beyond in their water conservation efforts and serve as an example of resource efficiency for our community. Prior recipients include the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, Eucalyptus Hill HOA, Santa Barbara City College, the Santa Barbara Association of Realtors, the Tobes Group, and Dennis Allen Construction. I'm pleased to announce that the 2017 Water Hero Award recipient is Mission Linen Supply. Mission Linen has been a member of the Santa Barbara community since 1930. They operate 44 locations in 5 different states, but Santa Barbara is their home to their main headquarters and 2 of their plants. And you may recognize the Queen of the Missions there in their logo. It's always fun to see that reminder of home when traveling in other states. In Santa Barbara, they process approximately 145,000 pounds of laundry each week, which makes water an important part of their daily operations. In 2017, Mission Linen incorporated new methods to better recycle and reuse their water. One of their efforts includes capturing water from their cooling towers. They have also worked with their suppliers to adjust washing formulas, which has resulted in significant water savings, as well as other savings such as reduced salt for their softening process. Mission has been able to reclaim 34% of the water used in their operations, and they use this water to wash additional loads before releasing the water to the wastewater system. Overall, these changes have resulted in over 5 million gallons of savings each year. And when you compare laundering at Mission Linen versus taking that same load and washing it in a residential washer, their process uses about half the amount of water. I wanted to end with a quote from John Ross, who's the president and CEO. We're honored to have our efforts recognized by the city of Santa Barbara, and as we continue pursuing new and better ways to conserve our planet's valuable resources, we hope to inspire others to do the same. The city is pleased to recognize the contributions of Mission Linen Supply, and for more information on our current and past water heroes, including really great videos of all of the recipients, you can visit our website. That concludes our presentation, and Mr. Hagmark and I are available for any questions.
Mr. Dominguez?
I have a question regarding conservation in terms of the lawn watering ban that we had imposed a while back. Where are we with potentially needing that? How much water would that save us?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Dominguez, that's something that I think we'd bring back in May. I don't have that information in front of me today, but certainly will be something we're talking about with all the different options for reducing and or increasing our supplies.
So we end up with a pretty dry March. Would it be possible to bring it in April?
We could I think to bring a complete discussion back, I think that we could bring pieces back, but I don't know if that would be beneficial for the discussion. I think we're focusing on May. I'm getting some costs back from ID for desal, and I've kind of focused they're getting their costs back to me in April, so I'm kind of pulling all of it together for a May discussion. And I think we have the time. I mean, we're looking at 2020 when we have the shortage, so we do have some time to really work with the community on this still.
So you're suggesting that we might have more supply and then not have to tinker with the demand?
Potentially, yeah. There's some options. One of the things that we're exploring with the desal plant that we have, each one of the modules is capable of additional capacity. So it works out to about 200 acre feet additional capacity per treatment train that can be added on at what I hope would be a pretty nominal price. The last pricing they gave us to do that was around $2 million to add that 625 acre feet of additional capacity. So kind of to bring that back and take a look at what that looks like. Cost for that additional supply is pretty minimal, so maybe that would be a productive choice.
Economic costs, not environmental.
Correct.
Because the environmental cost, it's a double win with conservation because you're producing less environmental harm with the lawn watering, and then the electricity that desal uses is very intense. So that would be just part of the equation.
What we're also trying to do too is, and I think Councilmember Sneddon has brought this up, is maybe this is just the new normal, and we're trying to adapt to that new normal and what that looks like instead of, just this drought. And maybe that's kind of the focus is what is the long-term gain that we need to try and prepare for. And so that's going to be part of the discussion in May.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Walker filled out a slip, but he left a message, dry time, he writes. So, Mr. Walker, if you're out there, thanks for that. Yeah, it's very dry. So, I did hear, I don't see any other lights on, so I'll ask it. Did you talk about snowpack in the rest of the state? I heard someone saying it's not a good picture either, right? Is that...
Madam Mayor, yes, the challenge has been, it's up until recently, it's been really warm. And so what moisture they did get did not fall in the form of snow, which ultimately brings us water later into the summer and kind of feeds all of our reservoirs. So that is the double whammy to it, to this. Not only is it dry, but then it's been unusually warm in the Sierras.
So our message to the public is to continue conserving?
Yes, continue doing what you're doing.
Okay. Councilmember Sneddon?
I just wanted to ask you have such a nice update on El Estero and reclaim recycled water, and Hillary Hauser with her rebranding idea of not calling it wastewater, but resource recovery or something like that. Could you just give all of us a brief update on recycled reclaimed water and how that is?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, at the last Water Commission meeting, we had a very nice discussion on the El Estero wastewater master plan, basically looking out for the next 25 years at what capital projects needed to occur. And then we were also talking about rates with that. And Hillary Hauser from Heal the Oceans came forward to request that the Water Commission and eventually the council entertain renaming the wastewater treatment plant to reflect what it actually does for this community, which is to recover both energy and water and other resources. And so it really, I think it hits the nail on the head that it's something we're definitely doing, and staff is digging into that right now, and we're planning to bring it back to Water Commission to begin that discussion in April. And so we think it is definitely reflects the times, and I think it's important to stop talking about it as waste. There really is just one water, and there is no new water on this planet. It's all water that's been recycled, and trying to get the public to see that and embrace that. And again, the regulations for potable reuse, in particular the form that we have been looking at, they're still not there. They're probably 6 to 7 years out in developing those regulations, but it's never too early to start preparing the community for it and talking about it. We are also working with a consortium of other agencies to present to the state board, here's how potable reuse would work for our community, so that when the state board is developing those regulations, they can have our concept in mind. So,
Okay. Mr. Friedman?
I just, following up on that conversation, and thank you for raising that issue. And I took a tour of El Estero, and I want to thank Mrs. Bjorkquist either for giving me the tour. And if you haven't been there, or you haven't been there in a while, I encourage all council members to take the tour. It's fascinating on what we're doing, and it puts a lot of this into perspective, especially as we're looking forward, the capital projects that need to get done, and also the issue of direct reuse and indirect reuse and reclaiming water, and just to see how those separate systems function it was really, I just want to say it was really cool to see all that. So I appreciate the tour and the discussion we've had today. Thank you.
Thanks. So we don't need to take a motion. This was just an update for us. So thank you very much, and we'll see you in May, and we'll pray for the April showers, right? So the next item